Welcome back to the third and final of these anaerobic glycolysis system videos. Hopefully the first one gave you a little bit of an introduction. The second one, which you were able to pause, take your time. We've seen the diagram, it's in the textbook. Hopefully my way of drawing it makes a little bit of sense to you as I did it piece by piece and really broke down why each element is where it is. That is the crux behind the anaerobic glycolysis system and how that system works. There's plenty of YouTubes out there that show it being interactive, but I want you to be super careful because a lot of them go into the chemical reaction detail that we at a VCE PE level don't necessarily require. So just be super careful with which videos you do watch out there and how much level of depth you spend on these systems. I do want to show you a couple of things right now. Firstly, this is straight from the web, just a quick Google anaerobic glycolysis system straight into images, just to remind you and refresh you. So if we have glycogen from the carbs that we've eaten stored in our muscle, they must become glucose first. That's a slightly time-consuming process. When glucose becomes pyruvic acid, that process there is known as glycolysis. And through the glycolysis process, energy is released, and that energy makes ADP and inorganic phosphate back into ATP again, because we know that third bond that was broken released energy, so we're putting energy back into this equation. And with that ATP, we use that energy for muscular contraction and it becomes ADP and P again. So that process can continue to happen over and over and over again. Glycolysis, time after time after time. But that glucose must become pyruvic acid. When you are taking the glucose as that form that's in the bloodstream and you take it through glycolysis, it is left as pyruvic acid. But as I said, this is a stopgap point. It can't stay as pyruvic acid. Pyruvic acid, neither good nor bad. But at this stage, we're still not breathing heavily enough, breathing fast enough. Our heart is not pumping hard enough or fast enough. So the muscle itself doesn't have enough oxygen. So there's insufficient. Pyruvic acid becomes lactic acid, and lactic acid is made up of lactate and hydrogen ions. And it's noticed here that the process is more complex than the ATP-CP system with lots more steps, so you can tell that it's going to take a little bit longer to get this done. What I'd like you to have a look at now is that in page 121 of the textbook, I believe it is, yes, I'm just confirming now, it talks about the anaerobic glycolysis system, and it makes mention here that all the pyruvic acid is converted into lactic acid. The byproduct of this process is hydrogen ions. And hydrogen ions are an acid. So what they do is this pH scale tells how much acid or base or alkali is inside any sort of substance. So we've all done the litmus test before, where you place a piece of paper on a chemical and find out, is it an acid or a base, based on what colour that piece of paper turns. We did it in year 9 science, year 10 science, for example. And so we know that while something becomes more or less acidic, it starts to stop processes from working well. So if the body keeps producing hydrogen ions, which is a part of lactic acid, which is an acid, the muscle itself inhibits or stops the glycolysis process. So the hydrogen ions are actually responsible from the muscles no longer being able to contract during exercise. So when you're actually exercising and you start to feel, I just can't continue to contract my muscles, it's because hydrogen ions have built up inside your muscle, making the muscle have too much acid and therefore stop contracting properly. It's because it's a safety mechanism. It wants the cells in the muscles to not be destroyed when it's too much acid inside them. Hydrogen ions can combine with pyruvate from the pyruvic acid to form lactate, and that is able to be converted back into glycogen. So lactate itself is not necessarily a really bad thing. Lactate here can actually be made back into glycogen and we go through the process again. So that's a good thing to note. But the way that that works is by transporting it to the liver, and that's a timely process as well. So what we need to understand here is that while this energy system is working, when we accumulate hydrogen ions in the muscle tissue, our muscle contractions are painful and cause fatigue. We will talk about lactate inflection point at a later stage. What's important for me now is that you guys understand really well how those energy systems, both ATP PC and now anaerobic glycolysis, are working. I would like for you to create a small set of notes about lactic acid, in particular, excuse me for that, in particular hydrogen ions and how they are an acid and how they stop muscle contractions from taking place because the muscle becomes too acidic, and also the fact that lactate can be converted back into glycogen for reuse by transporting it through to the liver and kidneys. We'll talk about more of this when we get onto our Zoom. I'll see you soon once you've created these 3 sets of notes.